Hello, I'm Mark Stay, author of the Witches of Woodville series and the End of Magic trilogy, and welcome to the second episode of where I'm sharing what I've learned from doing 42 Comic-Cons in 2025. Let's talk about costs, sales targets and cash flow. Oh, exciting. This episode all stems from one very long question from ZOE RICHARDS, who is author of Tell It to the Bees and Garden of Her Heart, not an author of fantasy or science fiction, but she sells at craft markets. So ZOE asks, what do you class as a good day or event? I'm not after sales figures, rather the formula you use. This is what I'm using and I'd love to know if it aligns with yours. So ZOE lists her costs as the cost of the stall, additional costs such as travel, parking, refreshments, depreciation costs, which are things like banners, bookmarks, tablecloths, display materials, costs for debit card sales because each sale incurs a small fee, costs of books ordered. Like me, she gets her author copies from a publisher at 50% off the RRP. Then ZOE tallies that against her targeted sales, then the actual sales and the income from sales. So the final result is total income from sales minus all the costs. ZOE continues, is this the right approach? I find myself wondering if I'm doing well or wasting my time. I don't have opportunities for Comic-Con events as I write the wrong kind of books. Sorry, ZOE. So mine are craft markets which don't always attract readers. Well, neither do Comic-Cons always. So, but thanks, ZOE. That's pretty much the approach that I take. I tot up my costs and estimate how many books I need to sell to cover those costs and target myself accordingly. You can tell I was a sales rep, can't you? I also keep a spreadsheet with how much the table costs me and the estimated petrol expenses. I use the RAC online calculator. So I can tell you now that in 2025 I sold 1,974 books with a turnover of just over £20,000. I spent nearly £2,500 on petrol and nearly £3,000 booking the events. Now what I don't track are those depreciative costs like the banners, the tablecloths, the bookmarks, and I'll talk more about them when I do a tour of my table in the next episode. And I don't track my biggest expense, which is stock, which is nearly £6,500 in 2025, because it's the expense that never stops and presents its own issue, cash flow. Now if you're just starting out and only have one or two books, go and fetch the smallest of your violins, because this is where I complain about the expense of having to regularly stock up on 9 or 10 published books. It ain't cheap. Like ZOE, I get my Witches of Woodville books from my publisher Simon & Schuster at a 50% discount off the RRP, and I get my self-published books from Book Vault and they cost between £5-6 per copy. What am I complaining about? That sounds like a good markup. Well, I've realised that in order to have the stock arrive in time, I have to place the stock order 2 weeks ahead of any event. So if I'm coming off the back of 2 smaller, quiet events and then I have to order for one of the bigger Comic-Cons, and if I'm doing this every weekend, which I was, then I'm often out of pocket, big time. Yes, there's a good chance I'll make my money back in a couple of weeks at the bigger event, but it means that I often end up overdrawn and it gets a bit squeaky bum time, and that's why I'm not doing this for the money, because by the time you've totted up your expenses, I'm also paying for editors and artists and other expenses through my company, including 2 salaries, and once you pay your taxes and your VAT bill every quarter, there sort of isn't any left. What I get instead are readers, 1,974 books that I personally signed and handed directly to the readers. That's a much stronger connection than selling something on Kindle for 99p to someone in Buttmunch, Indiana. That's what I keep telling myself anyway, and no offence to the good people of Buttmunch, go Buttmunchers. But hey, in 2026 the plan is to sell even more books. I've got a 5-book series and a now completed trilogy and more books on the way. So in the next episode we're going to talk about sales and how to sell and the tools for selling, and I'll even take you on a tour of my table. Exciting, eh?